Okay, so welcome everybody to the town hall meeting for Blue Oak Charter School. My name is John Clark. I'm facilitating tonight. I'm here with Susan and Charity. We have a pretty straightforward agenda, 4 things. And you can look over here or over here, but basically we're going to start with the introduction and just get a couple agreements out about how we want to be in the meeting. Secondly, is we're going to get a process update from Susan. Thirdly, is we're going to hear from Charity about the soil testing engineering and some of the stuff from Turner Impact. And then we're going to have an open question and answer comments period and close. So that's our plan. The goals for tonight, want to share current information, want to have open communication, both giving and receiving. We want to create greater transparency and grow the community trust for the process of Blue Oak Charter School finding its next site. As far as agreements, I just took the liberty of writing down a few that I think are always helpful, but I also would love to hear any other suggestions for tonight. And sorry to make you all turn around. So assuming goodwill, I think definitely part of the Blue Oak culture. Being concise, just because oftentimes there's a lot of folks who might want to participate. So thinking about what you're going to say and then trying to get to the heart of the matter. When we get to our question and answer period, we'll just get a sense of how many folks have questions or want to make comments. If there's a lot, then we'll ask folks to do it in 2 minutes or less, just so we're not here till 10:30. And then I think always it's nice to hear what input people have. So for one person to speak at a time, and I think part of what's implied here is that there aren't sidebar conversations happening around the room. We want to hear that stuff, or it can be really distracting. So we'll just try to have one person speaking at a time, having the floor. What else would you all ask for from each other? Yeah, as part of our agreements. And let me grab a marker.
Sure, I know it's a hybrid meeting. I just wanted to maybe put something up about how we can incorporate the folks at home, make sure they feel heard and everything.
Yeah, thoughts on that? So let me just capture that, like making sure that we're including the folks at home. So just in an effort to do that, is there anyone out there that can let us know that you can hear us and that we are successfully Zoom casting out there?
Hi, this is Nicole Tonelli. Yes, I can hear you guys loud and clear. Thank you so much for confirming that.
Okay, and thanks for saying that so much. And we
You're
also
welcome.
want to hear from the folks out there if you have anything you want to suggest as far as our meeting agreements. So incorporate folks on Zoom, assuming we're on.
Wonderful, thank you.
How many
Okay.
people are on Zoom?
Yeah, is it possible to just put them there so they can actually be here?
Alex, our wizard, not behind the curtain. While you're doing that, was there another question? Wow,
Hi, everyone.
we're just putting the Zoom participants up on our projector here and seeing there's a bunch of you, 22 of you out there. So it's great to see you all and thanks for joining us.
Hello.
And yeah, and let's just, if folks want to say hello that are online, we'll give you 20 seconds to do that.
Hi there, Alex, will you be watching for like raised hands in Zoom when the time comes?
Yes, and we can see the raised hands now. Thank you, Paige.
Right on, thank you.
Question.
Okay, another question from in here.
I know the mic is facing you. I'm just wondering, can folks at home hear us when we ask questions or have comments?
Most likely not.
Yes, I can hear you, Alicia.
Okay, and you can even tell who it is, so.
She's
and-
good,
And
okay.
if you can't, please let us know, folks online.
Is there, I see the camera sitting there on the table. Could you put it up front for a better angle and cover all of us? Or is it just the front right there is fine?
It might have to be one or the other.
Okay.
So possibly when, after the presentation's over, when we go to questions, we can turn it around.
Yeah,
that
totally
Or-
surprised there's people on Zoom. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
And if someone has a phone here and wants to go on Zoom, you can aim it at the audience and that could be one of the windows.
We're all sitting here. There's like,
Yeah, so-
there's like 15 of us.
Alex is
20 of
gonna
us.
spin the camera so you can just see the gallery, about 15 people in the room. Any other requests, suggestions for our norms? Thanks, everybody, for checking in with our online audience. Yeah, what else?
So last go around, it was quite surprising that we sat for quite a lengthy period of time and then had only about maybe 15 minutes at the end. And we're told we could only ask questions. And most of them, like 95% of them weren't answered. And still, most of them aren't answered. So I'm hoping that there's more of a actual dialogue this time where we can actually get some results from the meeting.
Okay.
I felt very unfair.
Okay, so asking for dialogue, some back and forth, and that we have time at the end for that to happen. Okay, I saw another hand out there. I think that might be it then. Okay, so just to review, and I think especially ones that were added, that we have some time for dialogue, some back and forth, that we incorporate our folks on Zoom, and again, speaking one at a time, sharing the learning. I don't think I talked about that, but the idea is when we're representing what happens in this room, that we don't want it to be like Vegas where everything has to stay here. But if there's personal information, let's say I have some fuzzies on my shirt, that kind of stuff can stay here, the personal info, but the learning we do want to be able to share. So we'll keep the personal info here, but the learning can be shared out. And then I think we covered the other two. So that covers our agreement for now. And we'll move to the next step in our meeting, which is our process update from Susan.
So as many of you know, the process of selecting and looking for a new site started actually back in 2015 or 16 when the district proposed the Measure K and charters were included in that funding. Blue Oak received about 3 million some odd thousand from that, and most of that money is still sitting in an account at Chico Unified. We have spent some of it on things like improving the play structure, replacing that, some computers at one point, the beautiful chairs that you're sitting in, which are officially for the music program. So they are no longer sitting in folding chairs, things like that. But most of it we set aside for long-term for the purpose of purchasing a new site. So we've been going through that process for a while. There was a lot of work done in 16, 17, 18 on really what we needed from a site and what the options were in the community. We have over the past 6 years looked, from my numbers, at about 15 or 16 different sites in the area, and have continue to go through the process of what it is we need. So last year, the current site we're going to talk about today came up middle of COVID and a lot of other things. So it was done quickly, and I know, and privately, and I know a lot of people are concerned about that. So the past town hall meeting was really to allow you to us to open up and make sure that you knew the processes that we'd already gone through and what some of the plans for the site were. That's why there were fewer questions answered, because we were wanting to know what the questions were so we could prepare. So we had that list. We were able to get that to the engineers who have done the testing on the current site, and they have information that when during Charity's time, we have Ron and Mark from Aten, who are representing the work that the engineers have done on the current site, the current possible site. We have not clearly finalized from this, when we first started into this process in August of getting really serious about it, we thought, the schedule was that the testing would be done in September. We haven't been able to, so a lot of the questions that have kind of sat and not been answered are really because of that process of being able to get to where the engineers could go in and do the testing. So that happened actually the third week in November. And of course, now we have the reports that are not totally formal yet, but we have the results and we'll be able to share them with you. We were able to get answers to some of the questions and post them this evening. I know that's very short notice, but I really wanted to get this meeting done prior to the December break. So I really pushed for that to get it out there so we could have this conversation and then move forward in whatever way is decided. So that's where we are tonight. We have Charity is here from Turner Impact. I've asked her if you have questions about how the financing works and things like that, if she can answer those questions and just sort of what Turner Impact's role is. And then the engineers on site to answer some of the questions about the soil testing and the issues around the actual physical site. They're here to talk about that. So that's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Susan. And I didn't really do a good job introducing either of you. I'm assuming most of you know Susan Dominigini.
I think so.
But many of you may not know Charity. And what's your last name, Charity?
May.
Charity May from Turner Impact, who has come up from Los Angeles to be here tonight. So thanks so much, Charity, and we'll turn things over to you.
Great, thank you. I will keep my introduction short. I know I've had the pleasure of seeing and hearing a number of you over the last town hall meeting. But for those who are on Zoom and in the room, I'll just provide a brief overview of who Turner Impact is and the nature of the partnership and work that we've been doing with this community, with Blue Oak. And then we'll spend most of the time, we've asked our vendor, Aton, who's been doing phase 1 environmental site assessments, actually nationally, but have been involved in looking at the site specifically and engaging scientists who have a really strong understanding of the history of the place here. And also the specific technicalities related to testing sites and understanding what elements need to be accounted for when looking to develop and to build something that's going to be the home for students and for families. So most of the time I want to give to them to provide an introduction to who they are, their backgrounds, and also they will walk through the findings and also more specifically address some of the questions that were raised as well in terms of the scope of work that was done. So I'll start with Turner Impact Capital. We are a turnkey facilities solutions provider. So the intent is to really partner with public charter schools. That's been the area of our work since 2011, but to partner with charter schools to ease the burden of site selection and development and facilities development, et cetera. And the work of social impact and mission. We're very passionate about education, healthcare, and housing. And what we found in education is that one of the key issues especially for public charter schools, is identifying that site. And that can be whether it's related to access, being able to move swiftly in a real estate environment, or it's more related to being able to identify and to have that development budget in your, the finances necessary for that development budget. So our model has been designed specifically to service that need. So we bring the capital up front, we bring the real estate experience and expertise. We have an in-house construction services team that works very closely with all the vendors, and typically the vendors, whether that's the architect, the general contractor, is chosen in partnership with the school. But our construction services team has over 25 plus years of experience building infrastructure and specifically schools. So they bring that experience in service to whoever our partner is when we're working on that development. Since 2011, we have built about 120 schools serving 59,000 students across the country. And we're honored and humbled to be doing that work, because the hard work happens in this room with leaders like Susan and with parents and teachers that are in the classrooms as well, We know the importance of having a safe and affordable, but also long-term home solution is critical for that piece. So the work that I do is building relationships, helping to identify sites. There's a lot of work that's done up front before there's any signature on a lease sign. And the work over the last, I want to say maybe a year-ish, has really been that feasibility assessment. So the first part of that feasibility is understanding what is the appropriate development budget that is amenable to Blue Oak and their financial position and the longevity of the organization. And then the second piece being looking for assessing the market and understanding the feasibility related to that. So as it can be in the world of development and real estate, sometimes certain parts of those processes take longer, whether that's looking for the site or even assessing the site. But I just wanted to kind of lay that out for all of you, that this is still very much in the feasibility analysis to understand the viability of the site, the opportunity, if it makes sense for Blue Oak, if it makes sense for all parties involved. And our process is very, very much transparent in terms of no decisions are made without the agreement of Blue Oak and Charter, because any investment that Turner would make, it is critical and important that it's really a partnership, because we're entering this relationship more long-term, but the intent and goal is that we can serve as a bridge to that long-term affordable home ownership for the school. So with that, I'm going to pause, and I would love to pass it over to my colleagues over at ATON. There's Ron, Carol, and Mark Underwood who have joined us. I think, can you hear us okay?
Can everybody hear us online? How are we doing?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us okay?
Sounding good.
Yeah, this is Mark Underwood, and it's nice to be on board. I'll say more later.
Great. Ron Carroll here, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you this evening. Just a little background on us. My name's Ron Carroll. I'm an environmental scientist with ATON. My technical expertise is in environmental site investigations and waste management. I'm also a board certified industrial hygienist, and I specialize in occupational and public health risk evaluation and control. Mark Underwood is with us, the PhD in hydrology, hydrogeologist. He's licensed in California as a professional geologist and is an expert in soil and groundwater assessment and remediation. Mark and I combined have over 60 years of environmental health and safety experience, and we've been working with Turner for a number of years, and we're glad to be here. So,
great,
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Hello.
Welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you. So Charity, would you like me to just give a kind of a high level summary of the results?
Yes, I think that would be great. I think we would love to just go over the results, and then I know that there are a couple of slides that you have prepared that we can, I believe either on our side, we can present the slides, or you could share your screen, either way.
Okay, we'll jump that hurdle. Might be best if you want to share it on your side. I can share my screen as well. But just from a high level, so we were tasked with performing an environmental site assessment on the property located there at the intersection of Humboldt and Yosemite Drive. And a portion of that had been part of the site known as the Humboldt Road Burn Dump site. And so between 2004 and 2005, there was nearly 500,000 cubic yards of residual ash material and waste debris excavated and placed within a disposal cell that's approximately 500 feet west of the proposed development property. So those repository cells are constructed beneath a cap system that's composed of an impervious synthetic liner. And then that's covered by 2 feet of clean soil. The groundwater beneath the area has been monitored since 2006, and Mark can touched on some of the details of that, but the area is inspected annually as part of an ongoing maintenance plan. That's a requirement from the state regulators. So monitoring to date indicates that the cap integrity has been maintained and has prevented impacts to the underlying groundwater. So after the excavation of the residual material that was placed into the repository cells, they did some extensive confirmation sampling. The city of Chico was involved. There were a number of consultants involved. And so the confirmation sampling from the cleanup indicated that the contaminants of concern, and specifically lead and arsenic, both heavy metals, and dioxin remedial levels, were all below their respective risk-based remedial action goals. So a certificate of completion was issued by the California Regional Water Quality Control Board for the property overall in December of 2005. In addition to that, the sampling data from within the boundaries of the proposed development area shows those contaminant of concern concentrations below the current regulatory environmental screening levels in soil for residential land use. So in other words, the certificate of completion was a risk-based closure, and it was closed to essentially unrestricted or residential land use. That's kind of the high level summary of the work that's been done there so far.
Excellent.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I might take a moment to add to what Ron has already characterized very well. But first of all, I'm glad to be part of this. I spent 3 years in Fresno. They were wonderful years, and so I got to know the Central Valley and appreciated the California approach to things, which I'm seeing here with this, community involvement and getting up and running. So my role, I guess, is to be the independent reviewer of the data and be able to bless that the actions that have been done according to plan, and that they were done with confirmation they were done according to plan. And from the after the initial burned material was gathered and put into a cell, they went back and did 270 confirmation samples over the whole site. And of those samples, there were only about 20 of them that didn't pass. And in those areas, they scraped the dirt and put it into the cell, and then they passed, leaving only one sample that didn't pass, and that was in a stream area. And that was left in place because the Fish and Wildlife thought that folks thought that would be more detrimental to the environment than if they removed it. So it's a pretty clean site when you look at it from the implementation and testing point of view. And when the areas were consolidated, then they were capped, as Ron pointed out. And a cap is like a landfill cap. It's very rigorous, and it would be hard for people to get into the underlying residual waste. So I commend the city of Chico for overseeing a very good remedial effort.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. We appreciate that. Charity, what's next? What would you like us to?
I think it would be helpful to bring up some of the visuals just to, I know everyone here is probably relatively familiar with the location of the site, but the understanding related to the burn dump and kind of its location there are a couple of visuals that we have that demonstrate obviously the proximity, but then also the specific sampling and testing where that occurred and how that transpired on the site that we have in question specifically. So I think it would be great, Ron, if we could walk through that a bit. Maybe I believe that might be starting on your slide
Can
two.
you see that? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So just cover page there. The overview, and we can obviously make this available, but it's essentially what I just walked through and what Mark explained in terms of the overall burn dump site. And it goes into a little more detail on the cells. There were 2 operating units during the cleanup, and both of those operating units were capped essentially the same way. And I kind of summarized all the work to date is in compliance, and the integrity of the cap system is intact and will continue to be monitored per their certificate of completion. So this is the confirmation sampling map of the overall Humboldt Road site. And so you'll see in red the proposed development site for Turner. And then you'll see then there's kind of speckled with these yellow sampling points. Those are the confirmation sampling points there. And of course you have the slough here to the north. And then the groundwater flow direction is kind of away from the site towards the lake to the north there, northwest. So you'll see here, kind of in the bottom, the southerly part of the area, there's a cell here, and then there's a cell here. And then 500 feet to the east is the proposed location. So those yellow dots are all the sampling, confirmation sampling locations. So it was sampled extensively during the remediation and closure. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'm probably throwing a lot of visual information. I can pause, or if you'd like me to continue, I can continue.
Do you have a map that also has the power lines on there?
We do not have a map specifically with the power lines. Let me see if we can pull one up here in a moment. But so I wanted to zoom in on the actual subject property, the boundaries of the proposed development site here, and just kind of show you the sample confirmation sample locations, the areas that were sampled in a little more detail. Kind of gives you an indication of the extent of the sampling effort. This is really a close-up of the operable units. So it's that area to the west of the subject property. It just shows the operable units. In addition to that, it shows the monitoring well locations. So those well locations are on the perimeter and are used to continually monitor the groundwater beneath the site.
So, and I might add that the material in the cells is above the water table, estimated at least 15 feet, maybe as much as 40 or 80 feet, depending on the time of year. So the groundwater is not in contact with the cell material. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Mark. So this is the area, the Dead Horse Slough, the area to the north, kind of drains down from east to west. This is the western portion of the site. So this area here north of Humboldt, you see the cells that were constructed, and you'll see a number of confirmation sampling points that were along that topography there. And then this is back on the eastern portion again, just showing the gridded system that was laid out to do all the confirmation sampling.
And I add that blue points are in the actual, what is it, horse Dead Horse
Horse.
Hollow or whatever it's called. And then the red dots are just reference points. So all the yellow ones have met the criteria in this fall.
I
Well, what
have
is
a question, please.
Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nicole Tonelli. I'll turn on my video so you can see me. Hi. I had a question as far as those yellow dots. Does that show, so it's the testing, but how do we see as far as the water flow, what direction that goes for with the site, with the proposed site?
Are you
As
talking
far
about
as where
groundwater?
the cap soil is?
So if you're talking about groundwater flow,
Yes.
it is flowing from basically the bottom of the slide to the top, but basically from south to north. Generally toward the creek is where it's flowing.
Can you
Yeah,
see
I'm
that?
showing the map where it's stated south or no. Yeah, I see that direction, but the same with the other side of that cap to what looks to the right of the frame where the proposed development is. That also flows
Yeah,
out
generally
at
the
a
same
direction
direction, yes.
that's an angle to the left.
Yeah, generally it's the same direction. It's
32.
not a big flow. There's not a lot of groundwater because the sediments are not very permeable.
Okay, and then those blue dots you said, those are the Dead Horse Slough?
They're just in the overbank area of that slough. Yeah.
Okay, and then my last question is just that there's a little corner piece on that proposed development that it's like there's a gap of yellow dots where they weren't there. Do we have any reasoning behind why that portion wasn't tested?
It just has text.
Are you talking about
On the proposed site, that in the red there, there's like a section, a chunk
want
right
to
there.
hear?
Yep. Yeah, I was just wondering about that.
I can't answer why there's not a dot there, but maybe it got lost for all I know. It's not something I know.
Okay, well, I just wanted to thoroughly make sure that all of the area of the proposed site was thoroughly tested. The rest of it seems pretty good. I just want to, we have Blue Oak as a family, and without all these wonderful children and staff, we wouldn't be the wonderful school that we are. And I just want to make sure that we're crossing all our T's and dotting all our I's and making sure everyone's safe in the long run. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole.
There was a question here in the room.
I do have a question. So the yellow dots are the samples. You said the red dots are a reference. What does that mean? What is a reference point? What is the definition of a reference point in this particular case?
I think in this case, it meant where they set a transit and pegged the locations of the points.
I see.
Okay, and I just want to say we're moving into the question and answer, which is right on track. And I'm also thinking, do you all have more info to present? So we take some more questions, but we have more info to present, or should we move fully into the Q&A?
I think, so in terms of materials, we have presented what, yeah.
Okay, all right, so let's keep rolling. I saw another question here.
What is the distance between sampling points? Because that was the 2004 sampling, not the current sampling. So what was the distance between sampling points for there in 2004? And then when you completed your testing, what was the distance between sampling points? And how many samples were there?
Did you hear that question, Mark?
Yeah. I can't recall. I think it's around 100 feet between points. I don't know exactly, and I don't know what the latest sampling was about.
Yeah,
And I-
some of those were at a 25-foot interval as well, Mark, I remember, which is pretty common. But just to be clear, so this initial site assessment that we conducted was a compilation review of all of the historic sampling that has occurred at the site. This phase of the assessment did not involve physical testing on site. In other words, we didn't go out and form a phase 2.
So there's been no on-site testing?
No phase 2 on-site testing.
But
So
phase one
there's been
doesn't
no-
include on-site.
Testing in 2022 on-site.
So Ron, and please correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but the review and assessment, historical review. If I'm misspeaking here, but the review and assessment.
Brad, speak for yourself. That works.
Brian, speak yourself.
No. There you
Okay, very good. So there was sampling and, oh, I'm sorry, there was testing that was conducted, some of the historical. There was sampling and, oh, I'm sorry, there was testing that was conducted, some of the. Thank you. The historical information and also on the site, there was a phase 1 ESA that was conducted earlier in this year as well by the party that we are looking to purchase the property from. So that test, that assessment was also included in the historical analysis and review. So what Ron didn't mention this earlier, but based on the findings and based on the review of all of that information, the recommendation that ATON has put forth is that this is a historical recognized environmental condition that would not require or would not recommend further testing or a second, what would be conducted under a phase 2 level of testing, because the assessment of all of the work that's been done to date is sufficient and also it's still within the standards and still within the recommendations and standards for safety.
So I'm a little bit concerned because I was told that the reason for the delay was to get permission to go on site.
Well, we performed a site inspection as part of the assessment, but there was no invasive testing. To Charity's point, there's a considerable amount of historical data that yielded a conclusion that there wasn't a need to do any additional site investigation. It's valid data. It was a cleanup that occurred with the oversight of the regulatory authorities. It's good usable data. And at this point, we just don't see a need to go out and do any additional testing. There's been no documented releases from any of the site activities that have occurred over the years. There's been no indication of any recent work around the area that would warrant any additional sampling. We feel like it's unnecessary and redundant at this point, considering that the site was closed to unrestricted use.
What is meant by recent work in the area? What time frame is that?
So we perform a site inspection and within 30 days issue a report from the time that we do the site inspection. And to Charity's point, there was another assessment done earlier this year. So you've essentially got a full year's worth of site reconnaissance that had occurred on the site. So when we do the site reconnaissance, we look for operations in the immediate area and within a mile radius around the site. We look at, for instance, a gas station or an industrial site, any operation that might have caused a release to the environment. And we'll evaluate that operation to determine if it's potentially impacting the subject property that we're assessing. And we didn't identify any sites in the surrounding area that would cause the assessment to go into the next phase, or the phase 2 section, which is the invasive testing.
Okay, and there's a couple of folks online who have questions, and then we'll come back to the room. So I see Nicole, you have a question. Actually, let's go with Brent and then Kat and then Nicole, just because we've heard from Nicole. I want to open it up to some new folks as well, but we'll get to all three of you. Brent, what's your question? You can unmute your mic, that'd be great. Okay, let's go to Kat then. Kat, do you have a question for us?
Yeah.
Sorry, Kat.
I appreciate you taking my question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but if you can keep it with 2 minutes or less, that would be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, but if you can keep it with 2 minutes or less, that would be great.
Yeah, it's just a basic question.
It's a little
It just seems to me that this is a lot of time into an investment into this site in particular. What are the advantages of this site that would merit any of this? It seems like with this kind of doubt and arm, why are we not even looking at other sites entirely?
Okay, thanks for the question. Who would like to?
It just
speak
seems
back?
like it's too controversial at this point. Why not just cut and run and look somewhere else? Kind of a waste.
Okay, thanks, Brent. Who would like to take that question?
So I can start. I mean, as we've said, Brent, we've looked at 14 or 15 sites already. We're looking at areas that would be the best for the school's growth and placement as far as within a neighborhood and so on. So there are a lot of reasons why this site looks good for the school from the overall perspective of the last 6 or 7 years of work. And as I've said, we've looked at about 14 sites, lots of different reasons why they didn't work out. And so we were going forward with this. I felt, as the discussion began to happen and there was questions about the motives as far as choosing the site, it seemed to me, so I did not propose a change to the board because it seemed to me we had to clear the air on this particular site in order to build trust for the community as a whole.
Okay, next question, Kat, please.
I didn't hear any advantages though specifically of the site.
Oh, that was the question.
Yeah, that was the question.
The advantage of the site is the location of the site within an area that is growing. The natural areas around it. We're seeing the fact that the developer that we're working with was interested in having a school right next to a multi-generational facility. That multi-generational piece was really important to much of the Waldorf staff. Trying to think back. So
Like me to add?
Yeah,
a little bit
sure.
more too. Yeah, so prior to this site, at least when Susan and I began to discuss, there were quite a few sites that you had already looked at. And the initial search when we began was looking at existing buildings, and many of the existing buildings were in industrial or office parks, similar to the one that you're in now. But one of the things that even if we were looking at a site, we're always keeping our eyes open for multiple opportunities to bring to the table that might make sense. But one thing that was coming through very strongly was the Waldorf model and the importance of outdoors and the importance of being very community oriented and community based. And it was almost fortuitous that there was a senior housing developer that had a similar mission and values aligned with Turner as a social impact focused developer, where instead of there being a competitive landscape as it relates to real estate, there was more of an open interest to partner and collaborate. So they are working through they're working through their reviews and getting approvals and going through their environmental assessments, et cetera. But they actually have made quite a bit of progress on the design and development for a senior housing component that will be adjacent to the site. So this site came in question because they only needed to use, I think it's about an 11-acre parcel. So they had a development concept for about 9 acres of that. So carving out 2.3 acres to be put to use for something else. There was the idea or the thought of there being this multi-generational component and there being good neighbors, mutual neighbors for Blue Oak was an important element. And so we thought to at least assess it and to pursue the feasibility related to the site.
What is the specific advantage of being in a developed neighborhood? That's offered as an advantage, but what is that advantage? Are we thinking we'll get more students because a bunch of families will move close to the school? What is the specific advantage of being in a developing neighborhood?
Yeah, I would, so from a development and developers perspective, because
Why
we
is it
have.
offered as an advantage?
Absolutely. So if there is new development, whether that's single family housing or multifamily housing, that's obviously a sign that there is investment and activity and growth that's happening in that area. But a key draw factor, if families are going to move into a particular region, they are going to be interested in education and understanding what are those education opportunities for them. So locating a school in close proximity to a larger master development plan, if that's what it is, or other development that's happening, is actually a free marketing tool and on one end for the public school, but also the master developer gets a benefit from that because they get to market to, as they're looking to sell the homes within the next 5 to 10 years, there's a school that would be available or here for you. Whether the families choose that school, that's a different story, but there being that physical presence. I think the other component here is the location of the site and the easy access. Some of the sites that were available that we looked at were closer to the freeway. So in terms of noise, in terms of pollution, those are things that you have to deal with in a city, but obviously not preferred. But
the plan is that housing will completely surround the school, right?
So just south, so I can't speak to just south of Humboldt, but I do believe to the east of Yosemite that there will be more development, housing development.
Okay, and let me uphold one of our norms, which is to incorporate folks online. So Kat, you've had your hand up for a while. What's your question, please?
Hello, thank you for taking my question, and it's actually two, and I'll keep them short. Number one is it possible that construction of our proposed new school and maybe some of the other things that are going to be developed around there could compromise the integrity of the capsules and the caps, and would that be actively monitored during construction?
Okay, those are your two questions.
No.
Right,
That's just one.
So let's take that one question.
About the caps, there are deed restrictions that you cannot build on those caps. So there won't be any construction on those.
We're building within 500 feet and I presume there's going to be like foundation building. Like, is that just unreasonable that would disturb the caps?
It would not likely disturb it because it's a flexible liner that ultimately is keeping the integrity of the cap.
Perfect. Okay. And then my other and final question is, if the caps or liner did start to fail, God forbid, at some point in the future, is it true that we would only realize that after the contamination of the groundwater in the soil? And then what?
Well, the caps have a leachate collection system. So any water that gets into the liner will run off and be captured. And they test that whenever it develops. And so far the testing has shown it doesn't have anything in it. So there's a safeguard for infiltrating water.
Cool. Okay.
Okay, let's get one more question online. Karen.
Hi, it's Karen.
Hi,
Let me get my video. There we go. Hi. Thank you for taking my question. I'm wondering, I've just been hearing basically one advantage of the school being there, which is to, promote the community and have good neighbors. What else is an advantage of this particular site? I basically do not want my children anywhere near a burn out dump site or high voltage wires. I don't understand why this is still being looked at. And Susan can only give us one advantage of this site. I'm just really confused as to why we're still looking at this.
Okay, so you're asking what are more advantages? So we have.
I'd
someone in
love
the
to
audience.
answer. Yeah, my name's Wendy Putnam. I've been at the school continuously for the last 13 years. So I was here the first year that we moved to this site. And our kids have been living in a Blue Cross invoice processing center, playing in a parking lot. I don't know about y'all, but the safety here is what I'm concerned about. We have been limping by in this location, trying to make it into a school where we have an opportunity to have a school that we want to build. And if it's not this site, maybe it's another site, who knows? But if this is safe and we're going forward and it's safe, the advantages are having a real Waldorf school, having a school with a real outside, having somewhere that we don't have to use as our gym and our cafeteria and our meeting space and our everything else, so these kids can grow and thrive.
Well, I think you're incorrect in that because the new school site's only 2.3 acres, so it's less than half the size.
But it's not a parking lot. It's not concrete. It is concrete. There's no grass there. It's all lava.
And there's no
Okay, so let's get into more questions.
So we're not gonna be able
or
to do
comments.
any build to suite outside, nothing.
Okay,
It's
so
gonna be very confined. There's not gonna be much space for any outdoor space on 2.3 acres.
okay, so let's stick with the form. We're getting into some sidebar stuff.
Sorry.
Question or comment.
I just want to thank Charity and Mark and Ron for coming and presenting. And I appreciate you presenting what you have presented so far. We just feel differently because it's our children, right? To us, it's not points on a map. It's not about capital. It's not a business transaction. These are our kids. And I am also very excited about a new school, but I'm not excited about a dump. About a school on a dump where there's no grass, there's no trees. There is not a neighborhood currently, and there's a lot of barbed wire fencing around an old dump. And everybody in town knows it's the old dump. I had the pleasure of speaking to a preschool this past week and telling them how much I love Blue Oak and telling them about the magic of kindergarten and Waldorf. But when it got to the point of our location and that we were thinking about moving to the old burn dump on Humboldt Road, I lost that whole crowd. Nobody was interested in Blue Oak anymore. This is a nightmare for the future of our school because Susan keeps telling us that we can only make, well, a lot of our funding comes from attendance, right? Butts and seats. And we're going to lose a lot of people if we move to a dump site. The PR and the marketing is quite hard for this area. And I just want to get back to the fact that,
But haven't we been
hold on one
slowly
second,
losing
I'm
people?
just not done. Hold on one second.
Well, she interrupted
Our
me originally.
I was just answering your question. There's no grass there is what I was trying to say. And the plan is not to build a school, just FYI. Turner Impact puts down a bed of concrete and then puts portable buildings and builds a school that way. There's no foundation that's going to be dug for a new school. It's portable buildings. The last thing I just want to bring up is that our children are our hearts. You know, there are hearts walking outside in the world. You know, we care about them so much, and that's why we're here. We are, yes, very excited about a new school, but this is not the right site for us. And I'm asking that we shelve this and move on and keep the process going and look for a new site.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if other folks online. Nicole, you've been waiting, and then we'll come back to a comment from in here.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me the floor. I do have 4 questions. I will try to be brief and concise with each of them. My first one is, well, I'm gonna make a statement first so I don't have to say it later. I too, I am concerned about not having new testing at the site. To me, that is concerning as a parent. Like Alicia said, these are our kids there. That's very concerning to me. I don't know how comfortable I would feel knowing that the proposed site has not had any recent testing, because the safety of my kids are most important. That's the bottom line, more than any money in this world. Any beautiful newly capped site is not going to fill my children. Okay, it's not going to replace them in our health and our well-being. So on to my first question, how long does it take on average for 2 feet of soil to be depleted? Because that was what was stated, the amount of soil that is over and the cap. Do
Your
we have an
question is
answer
how
for
much,
that?
how long does it take 2 feet to what?
How long on average does it take for 2 feet of soil to be depleted naturally? Just
They have to Nicole, they have to maintain that 2 feet in perpetuity. It's the goal. That 2 feet cap has to stay in place forever. And beneath that, you have a synthetic liner that that will remain in perpetuity as well. So
And the
that
2 feet of soil is clean. It's clean soil. They've tested it. It
Yeah.
doesn't have impacts.
Gotcha. My concern is how can a Waldorf school thrive in 2 feet of mechanically packed soil? We can't grow an oak tree there. It's blue oak school, not blue pine school, not blue lemon tree school. It's blue oak. Those oak trees have deep roots and they spread like, was it like 3 times the size of the tree? The width of it is how long the roots spread out deep and wide. I mean, you know, we're a school that has involvement with the richness of the soil, and I don't think that 2 feet of mechanically packed soil is going to be enough for us.
Okay, what's your next question, Nicole? Because you're
Yes, okay, my third one is how do you monitor the possible water leaks if that were to occur? Like, how is that to be known that there was a leak, and how often would that be monitored?
So they have a leachate collection system that intercepts any water that leaks through the cover material. And
Yes.
so
I
it's
heard you say that.
intercepted and they test that whenever it accumulates. Normally,
How often does it accumulate? How, like, what's the time parameter?
they go out 4 times a year, and it isn't every time that they have something to test. So it's hit or miss that way. It depends on dry season and wet season. But they
And-
test, and they haven't found any impacts in that leachate.
By they, who specifically, what organization would that be that would do those 4 times a year monitoring?
The
and
city
testing?
is oversees the program. They have a consultant, what's it, NV5?
that's correct. Yep. Nicole, they also monitor the groundwater. They have century wells around the capped area, and those are monitored on an annual basis. Those century wells will detect contaminants of concern in the groundwater. So I don't know if that goes to your question, but I wanted to make sure you understood that.
Gotcha. Well, I know when I grew up in Orland, and there was a lot of times where the water could be contaminated and we wouldn't get notice until at least 6 months or 8 months after the contamination concern. So that's the reason why I'm asking these questions, because, you know, just all of that is, you know, concerning information. It doesn't make me feel comfortable at the site. So my last, fourth and final question is actually for admin for our Blue Oak Charter School. Has administration or the Charter Council looked into the other proposed sites that specifically Christina Miller was so kindly to look into and suggested via email? She had also suggested a card inclusion partnership on a site. Is that something that our school can speak on behalf of?
Yes, we've looked at those sites.
And is there any reason why we haven't heard anything from those, or why we can't pursue those versus, you know, a historical toxic site?
So the CARD site, we reached out to CARD and they were unsure that it would be work for them. And they told me they would get back to me if they were interested. They have not gotten back to me. The other sites, one didn't have the infrastructure around it that we would need. It was in a neighborhood that with very small roads. Know that the city of Chico will not redevelop a new road, just as they haven't put a stoplight out here for us. They're not going to change their plan to put a school, and that's one of the reasons why new development is better for us, whether it's this site or another one. And the last one was very far north, and that historically has not been a site that's been interested in, that the community has be interested in, because of the same issues that some of the same issues. It's the transportation piece and the distance from the school. It's far outside of the area that would be successful for us. So those are the three. There are two other that I'm currently looking at, but I am not ready to speak on those.
Okay, thank you so much, Susan, and everyone else for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Nicole. So we have a question in here, and let's just move around in the room here because it looks like we don't have any more online at the time being. So if you wouldn't mind just saying your name and then your question.
Sure, yeah,
please.
my name is Ryan. Charity, Mark, and Ron, I think maybe we're all really fixated on soil right now, but another important piece of context here is that we are a community that was really, really affected by the Camp Fire. So a company up here called PG&E, their high voltage transition lines essentially took out an entire town. Those are the same lines that we're talking about moving within 500 feet of. So we're talking about soil a lot, but it's one of the issues that we're concerned with. And I think that this community in general has a lot of sensitivity to PG&E and to fire. And this fine soils, now we'll deal with this other very unideal scenario, each within 500 feet of the proposed site. So maybe that's a little bit of unspoken context that that is not being said, but is definitely being felt.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Ryan. Okay, in the back corner.
So just to recap, in the historical review, the approach site testing was done once a year from 2005 to current 2022. Is that
No,
correct?
no, that's not correct.
That's what, I mean, that's
The last testing was done in 2005, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I heard that there was testing done in the last
Every
year.
You know, there was an on-site,
Yeah,
there was no
Yes.
invasive testing.
Okay, so can we just clarify that about when the most recent testing was done, what that was?
And the spacing. And the number of
That's,
samples.
I got this question.
Yeah, Ron, it would be helpful, Ron or Mark, if you could walk through the timeline.
So the question is the testing around the cells? Is that, or
Historical review.
I missed I didn't hear.
What's the date of the testing that folks are wondering, like how current has the most recent testing been done? Does that sound right?
Yeah, not site assessment.
Through the historical review and all the information available.
The
Have
soil
been-
sampling.
So it's every year, and what's it partnered with, and come to conclusion that state.
So the monitoring reports come out once a year and there are 4 testing events in them. And I think the last monitoring report was November 1921 or 2021, excuse me. And so there's probably one that is due out soon, is what I suspect.
But that is the groundwater, not soil testing.
That's right. Soil isn't tested routinely.
Okay, so soil was last tested in
2005, right?
Yeah, I believe
Right.
that's correct.
So to conclude that means that, so with the historical review and the water sampling and the 2005 test results, nothing's changed in the site. So that includes that the area is safe. Is that correct?
I believe that's the presumption, is that there hasn't been any changes to the soil conditions. And
Just some more points to clarify. The space between the samples is accepted by the scientific community, correct? Is that normal spacing that's used elsewhere? We've done across the country, other companies use the same kind of spacing in terms of the samples and their space between them?
I can barely hear that. You're saying that the physical spacing, like the proximity to each
Yes.
point?
Yeah, it's space that's between the soil samples and the test.
That's correct. Yeah, it was. It followed state requirements as well. In other words, they reviewed all of that data and issued the certificate of completion. It was all done per the existing standards. Yes.
And the caps, the system being used for the caps, that's been used for a while now across the country, or is that something that's new kind of information or new kind of a technique, or is the caps over the soil that's contaminated has been?
That's a technology that's been used for years and is still a current technology where you use a geosynthetic liner system of essentially high density polyethylene plastic. It's impermeable and then put clean soil over it. That's an acceptable method.
It's been proven to keep everybody safe.
Correct.
No further questions.
Okay. Another question from in here. Let's just hear from a couple new folks. I'm sorry, and then we'll come right back. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tricia. So I just wanted to clarify as far as, because I think the word portable is perceived as like a little square box that they plop down that's prefab. That's not necessarily what Blue Oak is going for, whether it's this site or another site. It's not going to be a whole bunch of little buildings. So I just want everybody to understand that's not what the school would look like. So.
Is there a way?
Excuse me, let's just stick with the order,
sorry.
okay? So I know the two of you wanted to ask questions. Go ahead.
My name's Gabe. Okay, I'm sorry. My name is Gabe, and this is for you, Charity. You mentioned that Turner's been around since 2011. Housed how many students in that time, or built schools for how many students? 59,000?
120 campuses.
120,000. In that time, how many other sites have had this type of issue, and what was the result of that?
Yeah, so that we have looked at as different sites, varying challenges and issues related to them. We consistently will perform a phase 1 environmental site assessment. And based on those findings, if there are any recommendations or concerns that would require the second level of testing for phase 2. In my experience, very few of our sites have required a second level of invasive testing to prove that it was safe. I think maybe the closest thing was, this was more related to geotechnical analysis, but there was a site in Riverside County that was very close to a fault line. But this was a school that was already there. And so we did, I think, 3 phases of assessment to ensure that if we were to build a second phase for that site, that given the location of the existing school and where we would locate the building, the risk of that fault, is that safe, or will that not be safe? But again, in the context of that particular site, the school is already operating there, but we conducted three phases of assessment. So it's really driven by the site and what the findings are that
Sure. In the interest of brevity, so never had a situation like this where there's been soil that's been an issue and power lines that your impact has developed, or that Turner Impact has developed. Is that correct?
we have come across sites that have had historical recognized environmental conditions, meaning
Like the one similar to what we're facing now?
so I personally can't speak for all
Sure.
for all of the sites.
Sure.
So in terms of assessing the again, the historical recognized environmental condition, it can take a lot of different forms.
Sure.
Whether that's
I'm more concerned about what the one we're facing here.
Sure.
And what the end result was, and whether it went forward, or if the community like this one here was able to have their say. And what does that mean for Turner? And we don't have to get into that, but I'm just curious, do you have something similar to compare this to in your wheelhouse? And if you don't, then it looks like we're traveling this together for the first time, right?
Most likely,
Sounds
yes. And again, this has to be a mutual, that there's nothing for Turner to gain or earn to build something that the school doesn't want.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wondering what had happened in the past with something similar.
Appreciate the question.
So Some of you may know this and some of you may not, but I managed the Tama County Red Bluff landfill for 10 years. And I was responsible for daily operations, closure, post-closure, and operations for a material recovery facility. So I'm heavily familiar with landfills and how they operate and closure and post-closure requirements. So I will say that in this instance, they did move the soil that was contaminated where they tested it. The testing is only every 100 feet from what we're hearing. And I can tell you that our kids, do they only play every 100 feet? I can't say that. I can't say that our kids hop around and they're only gonna play every 100 feet. And so what we're talking as maybe an appropriate assessment for a residential area with very small backyards is not the same level of risk when we send our kids out into the playground, because I can tell you that they don't play every 100 feet. And so to say that a phase 2 is not appropriate or needed in this instance doesn't give me a sense of comfort for my children. And then I think that there's respectfully other issues with this site. It's 2.34 acres. And at the last proposal, we heard that we were also considering 2 additional classrooms for pre-K. And to think that we're gonna fit that all on a site that's less than half the size of what our current site is and have actual play area for our children doesn't seem realistic.
2 minutes, just so you know.
Sure. And then there's also issues with compliance with Title V of the California Code of Regulations that I've asked previously that still haven't been addressed. And I'm waiting and hoping that those questions will be answered. My family loves Pluo. I think it's a wonderful school community. These parents wouldn't be here concerned today if we didn't care about Blue Oak. And I'm waiting because we still haven't been asked about from parents what's important to us. We've been on the defensive this whole entire time. And I'm waiting for the school to actually ask us what's important to us as parents. These are our children and you need our children to go there.
Okay, Ryan, I think you were waiting.
One, sorry, one wasn't.
Okay.
No, no question.
Building on what Christina was saying, we also haven't talked to the students. What do the students want? You know, they have opinions. They're little human beings that have to spend hours every day there. What do they want in their new school? And where do they want to go to school? Because they're very aware, because of, you know, a lot of us concerned parents. Our children know what's going on. And they're also very concerned about this new spot. And I mean, my child tells me, no, Mom, I don't want to go to school on a dump. You know, I mean, and why haven't we been talking to the children? What is important to them as well, especially in this Waldorf environment where we trust children, right, to tell us what they want and who they are, and that we teach them holistically, you know, and we haven't done that yet. So I would also suggest that we do that we talk to our children. What do they want in a new school and where would they like it to be?
We got a couple comments from the online group. Regina, would you be interested in making a comment or sharing a question?
Yeah, I just had a question. Have we, before we proceeded with the site, like done a poll or survey to see if people who actually want to move, I mean, regardless, I know there's so much more on the table of like testing and all the stuff, but to be like, if we do move, would you take your kid there? Because I know a lot of what our funding depends on is kids, but if half the school moves, regardless if testing is okay or not, or the kids that come to school because they live near the school and there's no transportation, is that going to, you know, be able to level out with the supposed new students that will be coming in from that area?
Does someone want to try to address that question?
I can, there's a couple of things that as the comments have come in, but I'll address that one first. This current site, and understand that we've been looking at the site for 13 years now and have gone through a lot of different options and planning and so on for this site. This is not a good, and we've even attempted to purchase it a couple of times. It really is not a good site for a plethora of reasons for the school to go forward. Wendy mentioned some of them, and I could go on for a very long time. So the current site really isn't a healthy place for us to be as a school, Waldorf or not. The current site, as far as, so yes, transportation is going to be an issue no matter, it's an issue now. I have a parent just recently talking about the cost of gas. She drives from Durham and questioning whether she can continue to attend school here with her low income status and where she wants to come from. A Waldorf school, a charter school, all of the charter schools are what are really called destination schools rather than neighborhood schools. So you need to look at a place where it is good for people to be able to transport to. And that was one of the reasons that the decision was made to go to the area over off of 32, because it's closer to Oroville, closer to Durham, closer to Paradise, Forest Ranch, and so on. It's an easier commute and still a fairly easy commute from within Chico. So that was considered. Some of the things when we say we're the community question, there was a huge plan and survey done, and yes, it was a number of years ago, but none of the work that we have done over the 7 years has been done without that basic plan already in place. We've also talked over the years in our strategic plan in 2019, there was discussion about it. In the LCAP discussions, there's been discussions about it. So it's not that we haven't asked or talked about it. It's just that as we get closer to an actual site, that update has not necessarily been done. But yes, we have been talking about this for the full time that I've been here, that we know that this site isn't really designed for us, that we've done a lot of make it work kind of ideas, but in reality, just the fact that there is another building on this site that we do not have control over makes this a poor site for a school. Bottom line, we can't change that. So it's those kind of things that are just really, and like I said, I could go through a list. So we do need to move, when and how and what, and where, all that is still what we're working on. But there's a clear indication that this site is not a healthy place. We are not adding classrooms to beyond what we already have at this site. We already use those 2 classrooms they're used for our kindergarten after school program. So we actually already have the 4 classrooms on this site. That's not an increase in classrooms or even increase in services from what was planned initially with this site itself. So transportation is an issue. It's an issue throughout Chico for everyone. My understanding is that Chico does not have a normal free bus system like we have over in Glenn County, where I pass the bus on the road out in the middle of the country because they're bringing them into school. The Chico doesn't do that either. So this is an issue for all schools. The transportation is an issue with all schools within Chico. We have a number of plans in the work to continue to work to address that for our population as well. That question is not going away. It's on on the need sheet already. So it's not going to change that. And hopefully we can have systems that will help get the parents and the students who live in this area to the new area, wherever that new area would be.
I guess I'm just asking, like, have we just taken a consensus, like a general, like, hey, who's coming, who's staying? So we just kind of maybe would know, because there is a lot of diversity going on of people that are going to take their kids away and people who are going to stay. That also affects the social parts of our children. I mean, they've gone through COVID and the fire. So those develop. So I'm just asking that in the way of like, maybe we have a sense like, oh yeah, 80% are moving. Okay, good. Everybody's, most people seem on board. Or, oh, it's like 50% or only 40% of the people want to move to this new site. That's what I'm kind of asking.
My response to that would be it's a good thing that we need to do. It feels premature before we're closer to actually choosing a site. So, you know, so yes, that will be a discussion as we get closer to it and really are able to say, you know, for example, this is what it's gonna look like, this is what it's gonna be. And people have the opportunity to look at it and say, oh, yes, that's a place that is worth the 2 extra minutes or 5 extra minutes to drive to. Right now, nobody has that information. So of course you're gonna be, I don't know, you know, what else would you say right now? So I think, yes, that's part of the process will be to really start talking to the current population, not the ones that got us started on the plan, but the ones that are currently here. It's just, it is a little too early in the process.
Okay, thanks, Regina. Let's take a couple more questions. And one of the things I would suggest is just thinking about what it is that would be helpful. Like, what would you ask for that would help you move forward in whatever direction that is? So a comment here from a new person.
My name is Christine. Hi. I'd like to hear more information about the power lines because I haven't heard specifics on any environmental health concerns. I don't know. I know we have the power lines that run through Upper Park that you can hear them crackling. My understanding is it's not those. But what can anyone share more information about
Different power lines than somewhere else in Chico?
I think those are the same ones.
They're the same ones
I think.
that run from Canada?
So
to-
that's the concern,
there
is
only
there
one?
higher voltage or something?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I'm
they
asking,
go
I don't
across
know.
The giant towers that, you know, the maintenance is on PG&E, which has been negligent about the maintenance.
No, but I mean specifically
So
near where the
let's get into
proposed school
sidebar.
is, there's.
Who
a-
does
it's
know,
500 feet.
instead of
So I want to hear from someone who
speculating.
knows about the
Yeah.
power lines that are going
Christine's
to be
asking
close to
who has some
the, yes.
info. Does
The
anyone know?
the information that I have, and before Ryan brought up that comment, is the only thing I thought of, is the distance that's required to build a school. And we are beyond that distance, that the maximum distance for the highest voltage is 300 feet, and we're beyond that. So that's what I know. I do not know. I had one report from a parent saying that they weren't as high as the highest, and so we really only need 200 feet. But I don't know the level of voltage that go through those wires, so I don't have that specific answer.
Or environmental health.
Yeah,
Concerns?
I don't have that.
Yeah, and I think at this stage of the feasibility assessment, we would not have that information, but it's obviously a concern and a good question and something we would be mindful of when having discussions related to utilities as we get.
And are they the ones that crackle? You know what I'm talking, you guys know what I'm talking
Yeah, I
about,
know.
right?
it's-
Yeah.
I just,
Yes.
They are.
there's only
Yes,
one
okay.
line, right?
Well,
I
think.
was the same ones that go through California Park.
Okay, okay,
Let's
thank
get
you
some
very
more
much.
comments, back corner.
Just to reiterate, whether or not we purchase this property, because of the emotions surrounding this proposed site, we wanted to finish this process before moving on, if we move on at all. Just want to reiterate that to everyone. Also, trees are growing all over California Park, which is right across the highway 32. There's trees all over the, so trees can grow there. This site is on 5 acres. We're only using half of this site. We don't use it all. And most of it's parking lot. So 2.3 acres is feasible. Turner Agassi knows what they're doing. It's plenty of space. Kids want grass. That's what they want. That's all I said, grass. We're gonna have grass. So that's the points I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thea or Taya online? Wilson?
Yeah, a few questions, comments. One about the data that was presented or lack of data that was presented. Is there actual data on the type of test and the values that came back for the type of testing that was done rather than just, okay, all these got it, okay. Does that make sense? Like we tested for this, that, and the other, and these were the percentages of all those things at each spot over the site, or maybe you have, color-coded graphs or plots of that can be shared.
Yeah, those are all of those data points are available on, there's a data repository online, and that link to all those historical reports can be sent out to you all. And
Okay.
it has all of the backup data that we've been summarizing and discussing.
Okay, great. That would be helpful. For the power lines, I did, at one point, I looked up what the, you can look up the level that's going through, and it wasn't the highest level, and the, Mrs. Domenigani said the school was at a far enough distance, though was still residual, levels there for that. So in case there was some that helpful at all. I'm just wondering what is our budget? Is that something we can know? And is finding a site due to lack of budget? I mean, I know, or is it due to just properties with that much space or properties in the right zoning? Like what are the big obstacles there of finding a site?
Yeah, this is Charity. Happy to speak to that. So what we've worked with Blue Oak to determine what an appropriate or feasible development budget would look like. And I think it's fine. Yeah, so the conversations or discussions in terms of an all-in development budget that could be supported with the school enrollment, et cetera, would be about 13 to 14 million. Leading within that, and obviously you would have district funds to help offset that. So in terms of identifying the site, I think budget is one piece of it, because you have the acquisition price, you have whatever the development costs related to that would be, if it's ground up or adaptive reuse. And then you mentioned some of the other issues related to what is available on the market. And having discussions with folks who own the properties and being able to negotiate and get to terms that are reasonable. I think there's been multiple conversations about this site specifically, but if you can't come to terms or meet within that target development budget, that can make the site not feasible. And then there are other, as it relates, you mentioned zoning, sometimes that could be a component, but in many cases you can secure a conditional use permit, and that's something that we would be looking at for this site, or actually I think in Chico, any site would require a conditional use permit to operate a school. And so there's a timeline and a diligence process that's related to that as well, but it's manageable and it's something that can be done, but upfront it is trying to maintain or stay within that development budget, looking to see what options are out there and doing that dance together. It's an art and science to try to make that process work.
Okay, thank you. Just one more follow-up. I know there's been talk about the size, the acreage of the site. Do we have a design for the school if we had any site possible, or do we have a certain size in particular we're looking for, or is it just so site specific? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So I'll speak to that as well. I think we will typically look at the total square footage for a property based on your kind of targeted total school size. And so what we've been in discussions with is somewhere between 20 to 25,000 square feet, a little bit more closer to the 25,000 square feet range, and assessing a property that could fit that. In most cases, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 acres that we're working with to be able to build out a K-8 that would be serving about 400 students on that site. And I think through design, you can solve a lot of the challenges or concerns related to being able to provide the I would say more than appropriate outdoor play areas. That's a piece that's really important to Blue Oak. and other schools as well. But working with a design team to really be strategic about locating the buildings or looking at other options, whether that's going vertical as opposed to a single story. There are obviously cost implications related to that. And there have been a couple of iterations and discussions related to the viability of the site in terms of how we could lay out the buildings in a way that would maximize the outdoor play area, et cetera. But that's a concept that is conceptualized up front when looking at sites, but then as you kind of work through the diligence and need to get to having some sort of schematic design, more work and thought process has to go into that.
Okay, thanks for the questions, Thea. All right, Ryan.
Okay, I think what would be helpful is providing us some way to understand, because it sounds like there's a lot of, it won't work, it will work. And I'm a designer, so I apologize for the insane ask, but if you could provide some sort of rough wireframe, this is how a school could work on this side, on this site size, that would help us understand that perspective, because it seems like math says it won't work, but maybe you have clever designers. The other thing I would love to be on that list is just some more information and details around kind of ownership structure or leasing structure. I want to say that your firm has some sort of, is involved in the lease itself, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't have to be now, but I'd love more information on the details of how we are leasing it from you. Is that forever, or, you know, all the lease details would be great.
I just have two questions. I noticed speaking about money, I noticed on the handouts that you sent with the meeting that there was a question about eminent domain and using that to purchase land here for our school, and that Chico Unified is not interested in using that. And I noticed you said that Measure K came with about $3 million. Well, I want to just throw it out there. Well, maybe we don't need Chico Unified. You know, maybe we're willing to lose a little bit of money so that we can go forward with eminent domain to find a better site for our school. But I'd be fine with that. And I want to just put that forward as an option. Oh, right, yeah.
So the Measure K funds are actually Chico Unified's money that we are allowed to use. So in order to use those funds, Chico Unified has to be part of that formula. We can't just say, we're going to take our money and go do this. We think it's their approval, it's their money, the land actually, if we purchase the land with Measure K money, the land belongs to them.
Right.
So the fact that they aren't, it pretty much put up a red flag when I brought it up, would make it a pretty big issue to try to get around it. We would have to fund the property in a different way, and we may not be able to use the Measure K funds, which would be a major financial issue for us. So that's the reason there.
Yeah,
You know,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Second question is getting back to the soil testing, like the whole reason why we're here, right? I still am concerned that they haven't tested the soil since 2005, and that in 2005, they found toxins. There's arsenic, there's lead, there's other things that they found in the ground. And we have heard that according to scientists and geologists, that it's in a quote unquote excessive or acceptable levels, but to any parent, any level is not acceptable. Just being real and honest here. And wondering why it hasn't been tested again, if phase 2 is going to happen. But also my question is, well, what's next? You know, after this meeting and the feedback, are we moving forward with phase 2, or are we scrapping this? And when will we find that out? What's next?
I think that's a good thing to put on the board.
Okay.
It's an answer.
We don't know.
I can't sit here and think.
Sure.
Okay, so.
Is there a timeline though of when we might know? Only because some parents are getting really, I'll just be honest, getting really nervous about next year and trying to figure out, do I have to look at a new school for next year?
So we will not be moving next year.
Oh, okay, good to know. Thank you.
We're too far, we're too close. We don't have the time
Okay.
to do the building. So no, we will probably not be moving. We may not move. Sorry, Tricia, she doesn't know that yet as a board member. But yeah, that is within the last week, and working with real estate and leasing this site, that was pretty much made clear that we won't be moving next year. So you can put that out there.
Okay.
And I actually had the same question you did, if I could just add to that and speak to Ron. Ron, what would be the reason that we wouldn't have tested for 12 years? I mean, my understanding is it's because soil doesn't change that much, but is that, am I right, or I'm not a scientist, so.
Yeah, the data that exists is viable data. There's no indication that time span difference that there would be any additional contaminants that spread on the site. They literally scraped all of the properties and 500,000 cubic yards worth of soil and stuck it under a cap. Everything else outside of that capped area is basically been restored to background. So I think that's an important distinction. There's no indication that there's been any contaminant migration that would warrant additional testing.
That's what I thought, so thank you.
May I add, just to help with this question, ask a follow-up question to that, Ron? So the recommendation or the assessment thus far, there's nothing that has been indicated that would require more invasive testing. But at the decision or liberty of anyone in this room, if they wanted to pursue phase 2 testing, would you be able to speak to the scope in terms of what that invasive testing might look like in this instance?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate. I mean, I'm a parent. I've got a middle schooler, and I'm pretty hard on my school administrators, to be honest with you, especially with asbestos and everything else in the schools. So I say that just because but I am a scientist, and what I'm saying, and I think Mark would agree, is that the remedial work that they did there was extensive. The sampling, confirmation sampling, and the data that exists is very thorough, to the point where all of the regulators issued this no further action, these certificates of completion. And so we're comfortable with that science. I think, to your question, if you wanted to go out and do additional testing, I think you could do some soil testing, whether or not you putting additional groundwater wells in the property. I think that's something that Mark could talk to, but I think you could go out and do some limited soil testing and get a sense, confirm that you're looking at background concentrations. It's likely that that's what you would see.
Thank you.
Okay, another question from in here.
What a lot of parents feel is that we're settling and that we're not comfortable with what we're settling with. And it's concerning because it seems like this process is going farther and farther into the process without more open dialogue about what parents want in a site, what's important to them.
So what would be helpful?
But, well, and I think, I really think if the school district knew, I mean, if they're gonna be the owner of this land, do they really want to be the owner of this land either? Because they assume a ton of liability in doing that. And so I really can't imagine, knowing that the school's gonna move forward with this site, that they would be so unwilling to go through eminent domain. And I'm more than happy to go sit down and talk with them. It just seems that it doesn't make sense, and that we should be able to, because while we're a charter, our kids are still their kids, and we're all parents, and we all want the best site possible for our kids. And I just have a really hard time believing that our boards wouldn't be supportive of that. And so I would. I would venture that we need to explore that more as an option before we settle on a site that is so small, that has a hazardous capped landfill next to it, has high voltage power lines in close proximity, and the size of it really isn't in compliance with Title V.
So what I'm writing down, just to make sure I'm capturing this right, is explore Chico Unified's willingness to partner or to move forward with this
To
site.
partner,
To be liable at
utilizing
the end of the
eminent domain if we need it, or even seeking out properties that aren't on the active market, but may have landowners that, you know, with water issues with being what they are right now, a lot of orchard owners are willing to sell. They may not have their properties actively on the market, but if somebody came to them, they might be interested because they're not getting enough water to be able to grow their crops.
Yeah, so I do need to make the comment that we have childcare only until 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Which is about 15.
So we have 15 minutes. Let's take a couple more comments and questions. We've got Brent on there and then this gentleman in the corner. Did you want to make?
Yeah, I did have a few comments. Hi, my name is Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
One of the first things I wanted to point out is obviously scientists are saying it's safe, but our understanding of toxicity changes all the time. Remember, doctors used to recommend women smoke cigarettes to deal with menstrual cramps. And so we can't say what's safe today is going to be recognized as safe later. I also want to mention the soil. I was on UC Davis soil lab just yesterday examining the site, and there's 30 centimeters of topsoil that's less than 1 foot of topsoil, and the scientists are saying as part of the remediation program, they scraped some of that clean. So there's not viable topsoil there, probably even to grow grass, let alone grow shade trees. And I'm curious to the administrators, if you factored in how moving site will change your variable expenses like your energy bills for cooling and heating. Also, the last Zoom town hall we had, I was on the Zoom. Y'all mentioned that enrollment was dropping. And then today you mentioned how this is really important for our school's growth. So I'm wondering how we reconcile that. Like, how can we see enrollment dropping and then are we, is this like a field of dreams kind of thing? It's a toxic field of dreams. And I also, like Ryan, would like to know more about the role of your organization as you use the word investment and also the word lease, and that raises flags for me. So that is all my comment. Thank you for your time.
Anyone want to respond?
Can I answer the two of you the
Sure.
question in terms of our model? So our investment or development model is a lease to own structure. So we will bring all of the financing and capital upfront to do the development, the investment, start with the assessment, development, and construction. And the school will then enter a lease with us to similar to the lease that you have in place here, but in that lease, there's an option to purchase. And we have that option in there upfront for the school to know exactly what the cost will be for them to buy the facility, because the intent is that not for us to be long-term landlords. The intent is to be a bridge for you to own the property. If you're unable to do the development upfront and finance it upfront for whatever said reasons might be. So development lease to own is the structure. We typically put a 29-year lease in place, but there's an option to purchase between years 4 and 5. And all of the terms related to that are shared and negotiated upfront. And the development budget is what drives what those lease terms and rates would be.
I want to add to that there is, with charter school funding from the state, there is a benefit to doing it this way, that we continue to be able to access some state money that if we just went out and bought something, we would lose that option. So it's really confusing and complicated, and I don't want to do it with the 10 minutes we have left. But that there is a reason why we would do they would purchase it and we would lease it as a start. There's some financial.
Can you ballpark your cut? Like, is your organization getting 5 or 10%, adding 5 or 10% of the cost, or what?
So there's no market appreciation to the value for the purchase. So it would be the rent payments that are being made.
So if we're a charter school with a slowly falling enrollment, and then we move and we have a further falling enrollment, and we just really can't buy in year 4 or 5, what happens?
So, well, I would say looking up front, or let me say it this way. The investment has to make sense for the development and growth of the school.
I'm not sure that answers my question.
Is that because Turner Impact is a for-profit organization? Is that why you're saying it has to make sense for the development?
No, I mean, if developing the property, and right now we're doing an assessment, right? So developing the property is indicating that it would not be healthy for the school.
In what
that's
sense,
a-
monetarily or like physically, mentally, what, in all aspects of this thing?
Sure, yeah, in all aspects, right? So I think maybe to get to your question, but to step back a little bit as well, this whole process of us bringing the site and the conversations and discussions related to the site has been an open book in the sense of we're taking feedback, but we're also taking direction collectively with Blue Oak in terms of the direction and what sites to look at and how to assess it. Obviously, enrollment is a key factor related to the viability of the school program and being able to make payments and things like that. So it's obviously a critical component too. So I think what your question is getting at is, would we move forward with the site that, would we move forward with a development where the impact of that development would not be ideal for the school?
I'm not sure that's my question.
From your.
So they're just
Try
right.
Well, yeah.
It's a good question.
Yeah,
If we
yeah,
don't take it in year 4 or 5, we can't buy the property, then what do we do?
Then you
Lease
can
it for the
continue to
29.
lease it for 29 years.
So I feel like what she's saying, my understanding of it is they're not gonna develop a school if they don't think we can afford to pay for it.
Well, they can think that all they want, but then in year 4 or 5, it really hits. And we
And-
really can't.
And then we start talking about financing and how long the financing is and how big the payments we can't afford and you know, that becomes a discussion at that time. And we already discussed it on a regular basis, Charity and I about like
Okay,
what that's gonna
but
be,
the-
so it's,
So the one sentence answer is, if we don't buy in 4 or 5, you're our landlords and we pay you for 29.
That's what the lease would be.
Okay, right. See, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, and we have time for maybe one more question, and there's someone, oh, Brent, are you still on there? You've been having your hand up for a little while. Okay, you're gonna close us out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say with all due respect, my original question, it really wasn't answered adequately in the sense that, I asked basically what was the advantage of this place? What's the selling point of this place? Why so investment in this location? And the answer I was given has everything to do with development and accessibility. And even the example given was from a parent that drives in from Durham. I don't see how moving to this new location changes that particular driving situation. And just about every other parent I know, or at least half of the parents I know, are driving from all over the place. So accessibility seems to be a moot point and highly secondary to overall safety of the students. It seems like you're comparing apples to eggs almost. And I guess I don't really have a question so much as I want to finish up with the statement. This doesn't really make any sense.
Okay, I went ahead and I just captured that as a question as far as what would be helpful. And that is a list of reasons why this is a good site.
But none of them compare to overall safety. And so, okay, groundwater is tested 4 times a year. What happens if a contamination event happens 2 weeks after a test? You're talking about 2.5 months of groundwater contamination going undetected. And then what, a non-permeable plastic layer under 2 feet of soil? That's not even, you could say it's non-permeable, you could say it's safe, but I mean, over what period of time is that borne out? What other kind of developments like this where you have those kinds of safety measures in place can you point to that show long-term safety?
Okay, and we're at a point in the meeting where we're trying to wind down.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is you want more data, you want more info, and let me just review what I've heard as far as the things that would be helpful.
Well, more data and less momentum in the meantime.
Okay.
I mean, this is still moving forward, even though we were assured it wasn't. And, you know, I mean, that seems to be one of the main concerns. There seems to be no consultation among parents, all of which who are willing to bend over backwards to get their kids into an ideal learning situation. And what you're presenting is far less than ideal. So, you know, drop-off sites, road accessibility, a little bit extra gas paid. I mean, these are not the parents that take their kids to Blue Oak.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you want a more comprehensive list of the advantages of this site than what you're hearing right now.
And basically, you know, what the assurances of safety that are given are inadequate at best. So, you know, one of the things that needs to be on that list is an assurance of safety that you just can't provide.
I
All
guess
right,
his
thanks for the comments, Brent.
concern is it really doesn't matter what the good things are, he's not happy with it. I get that, so I think you've said that.
Okay.
And there are many other people in discussion that are having the same.
Okay, do you have a
response.
brief comment?
Just a super brief comment, spin it maybe in a positive direction, which is, this is our 8th year at the school and we love Blue Oak.
Yes.
Love, love, love Blue Oak. And I just want to, I think we all feel that way because we're all sitting here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that like, if we're not moving next year, like if this is going to take some time, I'm just curious if maybe there could be some discussion of like, are there small changes that we could make soon to this location? Like I hear grass is like something that kiddos want, my son included. But just like thinking like, if we're going to be here for sure for another year, maybe there's like small things that we could do to just make more people happy in the meantime.
Then let's go with 1 and 2, just very brief closing comments, please.
Hey, everybody, my name is Leo. Sitting here listening to everybody. Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate all the information. I really like this idea of the new school. I really like the location. And I haven't heard anything that would drive me away from building a school there. So thank you. And I feel reassured that the future is like big and bright, like across the board for all of us and our kids. So I think we're doing a great job and thank you.
One more comment.
And I really appreciate you speaking for yourself, because what's getting frustrating for me, and I think is one of the things that you spoke to in the very beginning of the, you know, what our goals and agreements would be, is that I hear a lot of people speaking like they're speaking for the unheard people, and it just would be helpful to just speak for yourself. And then if other people need to be here and speak for themselves, I think that would be good. But I feel like there's this undercurrent of like, everyone's against this or everyone's, you know, it's like, everybody's just themselves. So, you know, we all have a voice. I know I have in my 13 years been given so many surveys of what we want in a school. I know I have been asked that many, many times. Maybe it hasn't happened over the last few years. And maybe that's where we can, you know, pick up a little more, but this has been a 13-year process already. And I think it's great that we're doing this due diligence. I think it's amazing, but I would like to see it, you know, people just speak for yourself instead of for everyone else.
Thank you. And it is exactly 8 o'clock. So let me just reiterate the things that people have expressed they think would be helpful. What's next? Send a link to data from the testing, information about the power lines beyond that it's an approvable distance, providing a rough wireframe of how the school could look at the site that you're looking at, details on the leasing agreement, letting folks know that Blue Oak Charter School will not be moving next year, explore Chico Unified's willingness to partner and be liable for the site that we're considering, a list of reasons to move to the site, and lastly, are there small changes that can happen in the meantime at the existing school? So these will be captured, sent to Susan, and then we can continue with this process. And just an appreciation for everybody who's come out tonight, the passion in this community, the caring. We're all here because we care. I have been a parent at Blue Oak. I've been on the Charter Council. This is an amazing organization, and it's because of all of us. So thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Ron and Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, everyone.